During the wave of violence in Seattle earlier this year, almost all of the killers used firearms as their weapon of choice.
Tonight, Chris Ingalls launches a series of investigations on the trail of the gun. The King 5 investigators reveal how police across Washington could be missing clues among thousands of guns in their own evidence rooms.
We get a fair amount of guns.
At police departments across the state,
We see a lot of Glocks.
evidence rooms are filled with firearms.
Probably has print powder on it.
Guns taken off armed robbers, drug dealers, murderers. They are weapons that may hold answers to some of Washington's most serious unsolved crimes, clues that burst out every time a shot is fired. Cutting-edge technology, the kind you see in TV shows, is ready to turn that evidence into answers to real-life mysteries. But a King 5 investigation finds most police departments aren't using what should be a routine test, leaving potentially valuable clues where they lie.
I see bullet holes where they've been marked. There, and there's some over there. There are no words that can explain what it means to be here, to know that Desmond's life ended here.
Two gunmen opened fire on Gazelle Williams' nephew in Seattle in February.
And we miss him so.
College student Desmond Jackson was killed earlier this year when a wave of unprecedented violence swept over Seattle. In all but 2 of the 22 murders committed in the first half of the year, the killers used firearms.
Okay, so we have a loaded gun now.
What's going on here offers hope for families like Desmond Jackson's.
In here, we test fire firearms.
Seattle detective Don Gallagher is test firing guns taken from criminals.
And this firearm came into our custody as a stolen firearm.
This is what he's after.
So we collect our casings.
Shell casings are made of brass, but they can turn to gold for investigators. Most guns spit out shell casings, leftovers after a bullet is fired. And here's the thing. Every gun leaves tool marks on that shell casing, individual scratches and dents that are as unique as a fingerprint. Here's the part you see on TV, ballistics tests. It's a computerized database known as IBIS.
This image here is the one that we use the most.
Like computers that search for matching fingerprints or DNA, IBIS searches a national database of crime gun shell casings.
This view is the firing pin impression.
It identifies shell casings with identical tool marks, potential matches.
That's a match.
The State Patrol crime labs, which house IBIS, say the decade-old system has more than 550 hits in Washington, linking shell casings to previously unconnected crimes. One case in Yakima started with a single shell casing.
So we had 3 homicides, all linked by IBIS, and the police investigators had no idea that any of these crimes were linked.
Seattle police enter into IBIS all crime guns in their possession, guns taken through arrests, traffic stops, and search warrants.
Make sure that we're matching here.
Through IBIS, they can be confident that the gun that killed Desmond Jackson isn't in their evidence room.
Because I think there was like 13 shell casing.
Those shell casings are now on file in IBIS. But what if the murder weapon isn't in Seattle anymore? What if police in another jurisdiction have that gun right now? A department that doesn't use IBIS and will never match the gun they have to the shell casings from Desmond Jackson's murder.
Any city that doesn't do this is doing an injustice to my family and other victim family because they could hold the key.
But few police departments across Washington are doing it, according to analysis by the King 5 investigators. In Federal Way, just 15% of shell casings from the 250 crime guns in police custody have been entered into IBIS. Des Moines is about the same at 16%. To the north, Everett police entered 7% of their crime gun shell casings into IBIS. Kirkland police 5%. Among big cities, Bellevue has the lowest number, with just 2% of the 373 crime guns police took into custody in IBIS. In Washington's 10 largest cities alone, we found nearly 3,000 crime guns in police possession that are not in the IBIS network. That's 3,000 guns that aren't being checked for links to Desmond Jackson's case or any other.
I think we as a state could do a much better job.
Assistant Police Chief Jim Pugil says crime guns often change hands and cross city lines, so it's likely other departments are unknowingly holding key evidence.
I believe that several crimes may be going unsolved.
They could have the weapon that killed Desmond. Please, I would beg them to please test those guns. You know, maybe the gun that shot Des, it wouldn't be there, but maybe it could solve someone else's family crime.
So Seattle, Kent, and Tacoma, they test all or most of their crime guns. Tomorrow night, we'll talk to another big city department that believes in the power of IBIS, but rarely uses it. We'll get an explanation of that, of why, tomorrow at this time. So Dennis and Lori, I'll see you at 11 o'clock.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks. In police evidence rooms across the state, there are guns, thousands of them. Some could hold the answers to unsolved crimes.
But a King 5 investigation finds that most police departments in our state are not doing a routine test on crime guns that could provide answers. Tonight, Chris Ingalls looks for the reason why in his continuing investigation, Trail of the Gun.
We are in the gun room, and this is where we keep all the firearms.
As manager of the evidence room at the Bellevue Police Department,
This is our general storage.
Kim Current boxes and keeps track of hundreds of guns taken from criminals.
There could be a very good possibility that one of them has been used in some other crime.
One proven way to uncover the untold story of each firearm is through the ballistics matching system known as IBIS.
Essentially, it's like the fingerprint for a firearm. It's a great system.
A great system that Bellevue police hardly ever use.
They're going to fire.
To test a gun in IBIS, the crime lab needs this, a shell casing.
So we collect our casings.
If they don't have a casing from a crime scene, as with most guns police seize, they have to get one by firing the weapons themselves. Public records requested by the King 5 investigators show shell casings from only 2% of crime guns in Bellevue police custody have been entered into IBIS.
It boils down to budget.
The evidence room manager says there's a staffing and equipment cost for the test fires needed for IBIS, money that's not in the budget.
We have a total inventory of over 500 firearms, and so even an hour per firearm, and that's quite a bit of hours that we don't have.
Bellevue is the state's 5th largest city with a more than $35 million police budget. Bellevue seizes about 100 crime guns each year. Most of the firearms in police evidence rooms are legally defined as crime guns. Even though many have never been fired during a crime, they're taken from robbers, drug dealers, and felons. With IBIS, the State Patrol crime labs can compare shell casings from those guns to a vast database of shell casings. The casings on file come from crime scenes and test fires entered by police departments nationwide. A shell casing match can link a gun to previously unconnected crimes.
Which is where we enter cartridge cases into a database.
The crime lab manager constantly preaches to police departments that IBIS gets results if they use it.
We've got over 500 hits. In other words, by hits I mean connections between crimes that you'd never known existed since this system began.
Those hits often turn up links to crimes in other jurisdictions. Seattle is looking for clues in several unsolved shootings that occurred earlier this year. Nicole Westbrook was one of the victims, shot at random from a passing car.
I just want justice for my sister. I want somebody to say something. I want somebody to speak up.
Seattle police do thorough ballistics tests on every shell casing and crime gun they receive. But what if the firearm that killed Nicole, or a shell casing from it, was found in another city? It could be sitting right now in the evidence room of another jurisdiction, and police there would never know it. That's because outside of Seattle, few police are doing what the state crime lab recommends, entering their crime guns into IBIS.
Well, I would say that they're missing an opportunity. They are missing the opportunity to link cases, to get information, to make arrests.
Through public records, the King 5 investigators found that many of the state's largest cities leave their crime guns unchecked. In Federal Way, 15% of crime guns seized in the last 3 years are in IBIS. In Everett, only 7% of the 284 crime guns in police custody are entered into the system. The lowest number is 2% for both Bellevue and the state's second largest city, Spokane. Our analysis found nearly 3,000 crime guns among the 10 largest cities in Washington alone that are not in the IBIS network. But some police agencies have found a way to get it done. Ken has been using IBIS since the system was installed 13 years ago. Every single crime gun goes into the computer.
We're going to fire the weapon twice and collect those casings.
It's the job of Kent's firing range officer to test fire the 80 or so crime guns seized each year. Kent does this even though it's a smaller city with a police budget $10 million less than Bellevue.
We consider it a very important and worthwhile investment. We want to be sure that we're not holding that piece of evidence that might resolve a significant crime in another jurisdiction and maybe bring some comfort or some closure to the people who were victimized by that gun.
Now Bellevue is moving in that direction too. After we started asking questions, the police department says it's trying to come up with a procedure to use IBIS to follow the trail of the guns in their evidence room. I'm Chris Ingalls.
Chris adds Bellevue says it is talking with other East Side police agencies about partnering up to get more guns tested. After a heinous gun crime, the question is often asked, how did that person ever get a firearm? Tonight, our continuing investigation, Trail of the Gun, looks at how law officers answer that question.
King 5 investigator Chris Ingalls has the results of federal gun traces in Seattle and finds a big number of crime guns come from an unexpected place.
No good reason.
One family's grief during Seattle's season of violence. Family members of victims wanted to know how the cafe racer killer got a gun.
This maniac had possession of guns and killed my brother.
Surveillance video showed gunman Ian Stawicki, a mentally ill man, with the handgun he used to kill 5 others, then himself. All of the crime guns Seattle police take into custody, as many as 1,000 each year,
And this firearm came into our custody as a stolen firearm.
are traced.
It gives us a big picture of where guns are coming from, where we're getting them.
Police enter the serial number, make, and model into a federal database to identify where the gun was made and sold. It's a starting point so detectives can follow the trail of the gun.
So the manufacturer down through the the wholesale environment, and then to the retail sale, and then eventually to the purchaser.
A gun trace revealed that this Tacoma gun store is where Stawicki bought the murder weapon just months before the cafe racer shootings. He had no criminal record, so it was a perfectly legal sale.
Should not own a gun. There are just some people that it can be a devastating thing.
Federally licensed firearms dealers are required to keep records of all gun sales and report them to the federal government if requested. Through a public records request, the King 5 investigators learned that one licensed firearms dealer turns up in Seattle police gun traces more than any other. It isn't a dealer in Seattle. It isn't even a gun store.
Lockback and everything.
This Renton pawn shop tops the list. Of all the firearms traced by Seattle police in a 3-year period, 100 crime guns came from Ben's Loan in Renton. That means the gun trace showed that Ben's was the last federally licensed dealer to sell the gun.
You always hope that none of them end up in the wrong hands.
Nancy Cejudo has owned Ben's for 30 years.
You don't carry a license and be in business as long as we do if you're not doing the things the right way.
Her business routinely responds to faxed gun trace requests. Agents asking for records on the buyer of a specific gun, presumably one tied to a crime.
Because of guns, it's not like a piece of jewelry or a DVD. Guns, very critical thing, and we take it very seriously.
Compliance is our objective.
The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, says gun traces may lead to honest businesses that legally sell a high volume of firearms, like Ben's Loan. Traces can also identify other kinds of dealers, rogue merchants who don't care where their guns end up.
The harm that a dealer like that causes is that those guns go into the community. Bullets have no names, and anybody can pull that trigger.
To find a problem dealer, you only have to look to this gun shop, Champion Arms in Kent. Federal records show 1,215 firearms transactions that did not have proper records over a 10-year period. A court called these willful violations of federal gun laws because Champion received repeated warnings from agents. During one ATF inspection in 2009, Champion Arms said it lost 58 firearms.
So it was difficult for ATF to be able to track down where these weapons were going. Ultimately, they need to be able to make sure that weapons don't fall into the hands of people who aren't legally allowed to have them, convicted felons.
The United States Attorney's Office in Seattle battled Champion Arms in court. A judge upheld ATF's decision to yank Champion's firearms license. The U.S. Attorney says the business will close its doors in a matter of days. The manager here at Champion Arms refused to discuss the federal case. And when I called the owner, she said only that the business is for sale. Then she hung up. The feds say they want to ensure that gun dealers don't have a license to arm criminals.
If they're able to put those guns out there without any recourse, then it might as well just be a free-for-all. We might as well just be handing guns out the door.
Some of Champion Arms guns did end up in the hands of criminals. Last year, Seattle police traced 6 guns that they took off criminal suspects or from crime scenes back to Champion. And one last thing, there are a lot more licensed dealers out there than you might expect. It isn't just storefronts. Many people sell firearms out of their homes. And there are 1,301 licensed firearms dealers in Washington right now.
Wow. Chris, thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
The federal government is taking action after a King 5 investigation. The feds are launching a new effort to follow the trail of the gun.
King 5 investigator Chris Ingalls revealed last month that thousands of crime guns across the state are not getting routine ballistics tests. Now federal agents are offering help to see if those guns are crucial evidence in unsolved crimes.
We have to put those crime guns in.
From the head of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in Seattle, an emphatic call to Washington's police departments to test all crime guns sitting in their evidence rooms.
They may have the missing piece to the puzzle, and if they don't put that information in NIBIN, we'll never find it.
NIBIN, the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, is a database of crime gun shell casings submitted by police agencies.
I'm looking for ejector and extractor marks.
It's a computerized search to see if a gun's shell casings, often left behind at a crime scene, match casings from guns and crimes on file.
That's a match.
A hit could lead to a suspect that police would never have identified without the ballistics test.
It's only as good as what you give it.
And that's the problem. A King 5 investigation found thousands of guns in police evidence rooms haven't been submitted to the database. These are firearms from robbers, felons, drug dealers. Among Washington's largest cities alone, we counted nearly 3,000 crime guns that haven't been through routine ballistics tests. Federal Way Police ordered ballistics tests on 15% of their crime guns, according to crime lab records obtained by King 5. In Everett, that number is 7%. And just 2% of crime guns were tested by Bellevue, the 5th largest city in the state.
This is where we keep all the firearms.
Now, ATF is stepping in. The Bureau says it may send firearms experts from its headquarters to Washington State to help individual police departments.
So that if they've got a stockpile of 200 guns or 200 bullets or 200 casings or 500 cases, 1,000 casings, possibly we can have someone come out and actually enter that information into NIBIN.
The ballistics tests start with a bang. Police test fire each gun to get shell casings that are then mailed to the state crime lab for a no-cost ballistics test. But some police agencies say the test fires require resources that aren't in the budget. Bellevue has some 250 crime guns in its evidence room that would need to be test fired.
It would require a certain amount of funding for the equipment and then staffing hours.
ATF says it will help police agencies with manpower only if they agree to something in return.
The key there is once we get them caught up, it's the maintenance. They have to keep putting it in.
It may be hard to motivate police departments in cities with few gun crimes.
We're all supposed to look out for each other. That's what we need to do. We need to put every crime gun in NIBIN.
Okay, so we have a loaded gun now.
Seattle has a detective who runs ballistics tests,
Collect our casings,
and firearms traces on every crime gun.
Because I think there was like 13 shell casing.
Those tests didn't turn up leads in the unsolved murder earlier this year of Desmond Jackson.
We weren't here to protect Desmond. I couldn't take those bullets for Desmond.
His family can only wonder if the answer is locked away in a police department in another city, in a gun or shell casing officers outside of Seattle picked up but never tested.
And it makes me sad because people are walking around free that have committed murders. Please, I would beg them to please test those guns.
Some police departments aren't waiting for the ATF. Since our original investigation, two of the biggest departments in the state announced changes. Bellevue and Spokane say they started entering into their database all of the guns in their evidence rooms to see if they could be the missing link in unsolved crimes.
Chris, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
King 5 News has learned the feds are investigating a Renton pawn shop. Last month, the King 5 investigators were led to the same business by following the trail of the gun. In the latest segment of his continuing investigation, Chris Ingalls reveals a story of lawyers, guns, and money.
40 years on the same street corner.
Lockback and everything.
Ben's Loan is a Renton original, a pawn shop with a loyal following for firearms.
So we do a good business in guns. Everybody knows about us. We're a landmark in Renton.
But Nancy Cejudo and her longtime business are being watched by the feds, according to a warrant unsealed this week in Seattle. At this bank just down the street, IRS agents recorded more than $1 million in cash deposits in less than a year by Ben's owners. Nothing wrong with that, except that the warrant reveals sometimes daily deposits of $9,000. The feds suspect the business of smurfing or structuring its cash deposits to avoid the $10,000 limit that triggers a bank report to the federal government.
The reason why the government has currency reporting laws is when you're moving around large amounts of cash, we want to know about it.
UW law professor Mary Phan, a former federal prosecutor, says the law is an important legal tool. The government uses it to detect things like narcotics trafficking, money laundering, and tax crimes, according to the federal agent's sworn affidavit filed with the warrant.
The government cares if you're trying to avoid currency reporting laws because this can be a sign that you're moving dirty money.
Although the affidavit raises suspicions of structuring, neither Ben's owner or anyone else has been charged with the crime. The warrant does not mention Ben's sale of firearms. Last month, the King 5 investigators revealed the results of federal firearms traces ordered by the Seattle Police Department. Police used traces to find out how a gun ended up in the hands of a criminal. Our investigation found that during a 3-year period, 100 of Seattle's crime guns came from Ben's Loan, more than any other single federally licensed firearm dealer. At the time, authorities told us long-time, high-volume dealers like Ben's may get lots of hits even if they're doing everything by the book. Ben's owner told us earlier they are.
So you don't carry a license and be in business as long as we do if you're not doing the things the right way.
Ben's owner said she would not talk about this current investigation when I spoke to her on the phone today. Again, neither she or anyone else is charged in this case. The feds, however, have seized more than $163,000 that they found in that bank account.
Interesting. Chris, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Washington police departments are reacting to a King 5 investigation.
They admit they haven't been taking full advantage of a high-tech tool that can solve murders and other gun crimes. Investigator Chris Ingalls shows you how police departments are committed to doing a better job of following the trail of the gun.
Many guns spit out a valuable clue each time they're fired. It's the shell casing. A gun leaves a unique imprint on each casing, marks as individual as a fingerprint, with just as much potential to solve a crime.
You need to have a policy to trace every gun that's taken in for police investigation.
It's an overflow crowd at this first-of-its-kind seminar this week. Detectives from 31 Washington police departments are learning how to extract clues from guns they've already taken off the streets, guns that are sitting in their own evidence rooms.
Is the gun in your murder case hiding in the evidence vault of a neighboring police department?
Police departments have rooms full of crime guns, weapons taken from criminals and crime scenes. But a King 5 investigation revealed most departments rarely order routine ballistics tests on these firearms, tests that could link them to previously unconnected crimes.
We're going to fire the weapon twice and collect those casings.
The State Patrol Crime Lab urges departments to test fire all their crime guns and send the shell casings to the lab for free testing. But we found thousands of guns in police custody that haven't been checked for links to other crimes. The turnout at this seminar shows many police agencies agree that needs to change.
I know at the Sheriff's Office in Yakima, when I look at this, we are not sending nearly as many much firearms evidence as we could to the lab to be looked at.
A computer terminal at the crime lab compares the unique tool marks on each spent shell casing to a nationwide database of all other casings on file. A match can be big. A shell casing from Yakima, for example, was the link between 3 homicides in central Washington.
We've got over 500 hits. In other words, by hits I mean connections between crimes that you'd never known existed since this system began.
Police departments took notice of our original story in October. Since then, submissions of shell casings to the State Patrol's crime labs have increased by almost a third, 30% more than the same time period last year.
Come over here to the match point.
And with more detectives getting up to speed, the crime lab will add another firearms technician to handle the workload. So while this kind of training is happening here at the State Academy, the King 5 investigators have found that nationwide, it's a different story. By the time the school shootings in Connecticut focused the nation on gun crimes, the federal government had quietly dismantled much of the nationwide ballistics network. Through the Freedom of Information Act, we found the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms unplugged ballistics terminals in dozens of cities. In February of 2011, there were 235 of these terminals nationwide. 18 months later, 25% of them were gone. The ATF says it removed the terminals because they weren't getting enough use, and the Bureau needed to make budget cuts. Are we using this ballistics network to its fullest potential?
Unfortunately, it hasn't been.
Brad Buckles is the former ATF director who founded the ballistics network in 1999. He faults the Bureau, even during his own administration, for not providing support and leadership that would convince all police departments to test their crime guns.
I think there are thousands, probably tens of thousands of firearms around the country, and police department vaults that are never test fired and are never entered into that system. It's frustrating to watch.
A spokesperson told me that the ATF stands by this technology, and it's been issuing new, updated equipment and software to agencies that use the technology a lot. Here, it's the Washington State Patrol that deserves the credit for meeting that mark. The State Patrol Crime Lab has just received a new 3D ballistics terminal with even more potential to help police with their crime fighting. But it's a shame that there's so many parts of the country that just aren't using this technology to its fullest potential.
All right. Chris, thanks.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
Thank you, Chris.
There's been a lot of news lately about police departments getting unwanted weapons off the streets with gun buybacks. But what about a gun sellback?
Tonight, the King 5 investigators reveal that many police departments put more guns on the streets. King 5 investigator Chris Ingalls reports on the trail of the gun and how weapons seized or surrendered to police find new life.
The owner of this one actually asked for it to be destroyed.
These are unwanted guns from Thurston County.
And this is a little .22.
Many citizens called the sheriff's department, asking deputies to take them off their hands.
Because of the unfortunate incident that happened in Newtown, we got an extraordinary amount of calls.
So the sheriff held his first ever gun take-back.
So it's nice to know that we at least got these off the street.
But unlike the buyback in Seattle, in which police exchanged gift certificates for guns, the guns in Thurston County may not have seen their last reload. The sheriff's department will sell the firearms if the citizen who turned it in allows.
And they are given two choices, to either have it destroyed or to allow the sheriff's office to use it as credits to purchase duty weapon or duty ammunition.
Surrendered firearms account for some of the guns in police lockups. Most are crime guns, those seized from criminals or crime scenes that are legally forfeited. Records examined by the King 5 investigators show that many police agencies sell the firearms, including crime guns, in their custody. And that includes some weapons that police themselves don't like to face. Records filed with the state show an SKS military rifle and an AK-47 among the batch of 40 guns sold by Thurston County's Drug Task Force. A Tech-9, which used to be on the list of banned assault weapons, was sold by the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office. And the State Patrol lists sales of military-style rifles and AK-47s. These are what are considered assault weapons.
We draw a fairly bright line if it's a weapon that's legal to sell and it's not got an emotional component to it because it was used in a high-profile crime, then we go ahead and sell or trade that to a federally licensed dealer.
The State Patrol is the only agency that's bound by this state law. It says the guns it seizes must be auctioned or traded to licensed dealers.
We should not be putting those back in circulation, no.
We asked the ranking Democrat on the Senate committee that oversees criminal justice about this. He responded by drafting a bill that gives the State Patrol the option to destroy guns, especially assault weapons.
Yes, it's legal, but we have to look at it as a legislature, we have to look at it in policy terms. Do we want to allow that to continue to be our policy? I don't know. I don't.
This invoice from last May shows the State Patrol earned $42,000 in credit from a firearms dealer, trading 211 crime guns for new guns to be used by troopers. The State Patrol says those are results taxpayers should appreciate.
And if we can get some value for them as opposed to asking the taxpayer to buy us this equipment with cash, we're doing them a favor.
But the guns can end up back in the wrong hands. In one local case, federal court records show crime guns sold by police ended up at 8 different crime scenes, including assaults and a robbery. The crime guns were purchased by this former Bremerton police detective who made big profits reselling them at gun shows. Roy Alloway is now in federal prison for the sale of more than 700 guns without background checks and the proper firearms license.
And it's not just criminals. We get guns that are turned in. We get guns that people are ineligible to possess.
Some departments, like King County, say selling those guns isn't worth the risk.
It has nothing to do with gun control or anything like that. I don't want a gun that's been in our custody being used in a crime somewhere down the line.
You can see that this sights on here were painted.
Thurston County's policy was in place long before Sheriff Snaza took office.
A couple of 12-gauge shotguns, pump shotguns.
He says the department only deals with respected, federally licensed firearm dealers who resell the guns with a background check.
You know, you hope that those weapons are sold to responsible individuals. We know that you can't guarantee everything, but as long as we know that we're doing the best we can and following by the rules, it's the best we can do.
Chris Ingalls, King 5 News.
It's unclear if the bill that would allow the State Patrol to destroy guns has a chance of passing into law. Republican Senator Mike Patton of Spokane says he supports the sale of legal guns by police departments to raise funds. As chairman of the Law and Justice Committee, the bill will only get a hearing if Senator Patton allows it.